We can run anything without you.
Thank you, Father. We'll begin in a moment. Okay, we're all set. Okay, welcome. We'll call to order the regular meeting of the Pinehurst Village Council for October 8th, 2024. As is our usual custom here, we'll begin with an invocation from Father Forbes of the Sacred Heart Church right down the street from us, and we'll follow with a Pledge of Allegiance led by Benson Shiro of the Pinehurst Elementary School's 4th grade. We're looking forward to that. So, Father, please come forward. Go to the mic, sure. Go to the microphone if you'd like. Yeah, right there at the podium.
Good and gracious God, we praise and thank you for the gift of this beautiful fall day. We're especially aware of all those who are not able to enjoy this day as we are, those who are suffering from war and violence, and those who are recovering from natural disasters, those who are in danger from the coming storm. We ask that you might bless all of our people. Help us to be aware of the blessings that are in our lives, of the goodness that we find among us, between our fellow human beings. And we ask that you might continue to help us to see the generosity of our community, especially as they are reaching out to those who have been affected by these disasters. We ask that you might bless all of our elected officials. Help them with the gift of your Spirit, that they may be inspired to the common good. And we ask all these things through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Okay, if we can please rise, and Benson, if you can come up to the microphone and lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Well done. Okay. Let's continue, as we usually do. We'll get reports and updates, first with the village manager.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So we had village staff and residents with a collection of items that are going to be going out to Western North Carolina to help with those who are suffering from the floods and the effects of the hurricane. So we collected about 3 truckloads of stuff here at Village Hall and transported that to the airport, which then got sent out to Western North Carolina. We also have a couple of firefighters that have been out there, Jay Neal and I think it's Lieutenant Austin Majors, yes. So they've been out there, and next week we will also be sending a couple of police officers to help out as well. We do get reimbursed from FEMA for those salaries that are for those guys out there, but we're trying to do the best we can to support communities that are suffering. We do have a couple of activities coming up. So Live After 5 is this Friday at 5:15 at the Arboretum, and the band is Too Much Sylvia. And then Holly Arts and Crafts, it will be on Saturday, October 19th, and that's from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And that's all.
Thank you. Obviously, as Doug just mentioned, that the Asheville storm there in Western Carolina, I want to compliment many of our residents have jumped into action through donations and piling up. Many piled up in our lobby that, as Doug mentioned, have been transported to the airport and onward to Western Carolina and elsewhere. Are thankful to the fire and police who are cooperating with the statewide efforts. I believe there'll probably be other organized developments in the days and weeks to come that may involve Pinehurst, and I know our residents will meet the challenge that will be asked of us by our neighbors who just are not as fortunate as we are at this moment. So we'll keep you posted as developments occur. But This past week, I attended a manufacturing day breakfast at Sand Hills Community College with some local business and community leaders that emphasized that we do have a manufacturing base in Moore County. We have a few in Pinehurst, but they're spread out more in Moore County, and that it is an important part of our economy. And so we look forward to cooperating with that community where we can. Also, last week, myself and the village manager attended a meeting of mayors and managers from across Moore County. This was prior to the hurricane, and we were discussing an array of municipal issues that we all face and things we need to prepare for that relate to growth and sewer projects and roads and all that. But it was very helpful to hear from other communities as to what they're going through, some of which are very similar to the issues we face, and there'll be a follow-up to this semi-regular scheduled meeting in December. I believe we're going to be meeting at Robbins. The one last week was in Aberdeen. We also had a Tri-Cities meeting with our neighbors in Aberdeen and Southern Pines to discuss issues very much centric to our three communities. We touched on the Metropolitan Planning Organization topic in particular, and we'll continue to meet regularly with Aberdeen and Southern Pines officials. And on September 28th, the 5th annual Flutterby Festival was a success at the Arboretum. So I want to thank those village residents who participated, and I want to thank the village staff who helped make it all possible, working with the Historical Association. It was a big event. Must have been 1,000 people there, and a lot of kids got to learn about butterflies. So thank you for all that. And I will now ask Dr. Morgan if he has any comments to make.
Thank you. Just a few. I want to give a few shout-outs here. First one goes to Tim and Carla San Germain. They have been instrumental in the Sand Hills Farmers Market that's on the Village Green. When that runs from the mid portion of April through September, so we've had another successful season. A couple challenges when they opened came in, how it was going to work, and Carla was all over that and able to work up a deal to keep the farmers market going. But I think it provides a very neat aspect for us here in town. They have on Wednesdays and Saturdays where the farmers market's open, and I personally can tell you that we got a lot of spices from there, a lot of produce from there, and it's got a place in there where you can also get some flowers. So my wife received a few bouquets of flowers from that. But great thing to go to if you haven't been there, and thank you to Tim and Carla for all your work through all these years and keeping that going, because we know it's a labor of love, but it's something that's very instrumental for our community. Also want to do another shout out to Marty and Susan McKenzie, much on what Doug was referring to. Within 2 days after the hurricane went through, they had got a series of folks to donate and loaded up a big trailer and had that going into the mountains. And so it was a very quick response on that. So I know we've had other residents who have been very proactive in assisting with that, but it was taken on their own to do that and make that happen. So thank you to them. Last thing on there, just in reference to the hurricane, I know we've all seen a lot of stuff on there. I did receive a text from the Forces Command, Chief of Staff of the Army, Chief of Staff and their Forces Command is part of the Army, but it was Major General Shane Buzza, just in reference to the deployment of forces to assist with that. The North Carolina had to accept assistance from the federal forces on there when they accepted that, and they've been out there now for quite a few days. May not have been as quickly as we would have liked to have seen that, but they went through their process. And so we have a series of folks from the 18th Airborne Corps on that. So folks from Fort Bragg have deployed out there. So people in our backyard are now working hard to assist with that hurricane. So you probably know some of them as your neighbors that have moved out there. So anyway, that's all I have for this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Councilman Taylor.
I also attended the quarterly meeting of mayors along with the mayor and the village manager, and I was struck by the number of issues as people went around the table that it span more than just the boundaries of any one municipality. I mean, we're all elected by the people of Pinehurst and so forth and all the other municipalities, and then, of course, we have the County Board of Commissioners. But there are some issues where these things are very much intertwined. And I think this has been a good thing. You know, we've done the Tri-Cities with Aberdeen and Southern Pines for some time, but this is a good thing to have people talking about these things. There's always going to be, to a certain extent, some political tension because of different constituencies that vote for different people who have different responsibilities. But I think this is going to be increasingly important over the next, 5 years or so as the county deals with revisions to its land use plan, water, and other issues that are going to affect us all. So a good thing, and that next meeting is scheduled in December sometime. That's it for me.
Thank you. Councilman Ficklin.
Thank you. Beautification Committee met yesterday afternoon. In addition to the many activities that they are involved with for our community, they are also pursuing having a historic marker made to honor the work of Warren H. Manning for his architectural landscape architecture contributions to the village. In addition to that, the Beautification Committee will be assuming responsibility for plantings at the entrance to the harness track from Route 5. So look forward to some improvements there as we go forward. And one other reminder, I'm sure you've received in the mail lots of information on this, but don't forget that October 17th begins early voting. So get your voice heard early, and that will end, early voting ends on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Councilman Farrell.
Thank you, Pat. The only thing I wanted to mention was that I met with 4 members of the community yesterday and had a long discussion about our favorite topic, the traffic circle. In particular, there were at least 2 very, very creative design alternatives that I've never seen before, and a discussion about the use of artificial intelligence. But I'd like to, if I could, explore that in a little more detail under new business, or excuse me, new business at the end of the meeting, if that's all right. And so we can discuss whether or not that's appropriate to continue that effort.
Okay, look forward to hearing more from you on that. Okay, that includes the reports. Let us go on to the consent agenda and a motion to approve it. All items listed below are considered to have been discussed at length in previous meetings and will be enacted by one motion. No separate discussion will be held unless requested by a member of the village council. So the items up for approval on the consent agenda deal with the village council meeting minutes, the special meeting minutes of September 24th, the regular meeting minutes of September 24th, and the work session meeting minutes of September 24th. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
Second.
I had one question before we vote, and it's really more a question for Shannon.
Okay.
Shannon, I noticed in the material that was prepared for us, in each case there was a so-called staff report, which said nothing other than minutes. Is that required by statute, or is that something that could just be skipped in favor of listing just the minutes? Got it. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion adopted. Consent agenda is approved. And now we will see if there are anybody who has some public comments. I don't know if anyone signed in. I'm sure that's being checked. If you don't have to have signed in, so I'll open it up to see if there is anybody here who would like to make any public comments on any issues relative to the village of Pinehurst. Feel free to come forward, identify yourself, and address us from the podium there with the microphone. Okay. Seeing no one, it's a quiet Pinehurst afternoon. We'll now go to item 6, which is appointments. We have a couple of resolutions here. Doug, do you want to lead this?
Yeah, so our first one is for Luis Mercuro to be on the Planning and Zoning Board as well as the Board of Appeals. It's the same board. Luis has been serving on it for one term, and we recommend that she be reappointed. She has lots of experience. She was in the planning field in the city of Memphis, and she's been serving very diligently and attends all the meetings. So she was very instrumental in helping us with the small area plans and the form-based codes. So she'll be a great fit to continue on the board.
How long will this appointment be?
It'll be 2 years, so it'll expire in October 2026.
Okay. All right, any other discussion, or we can entertain a motion here?
I move to approve Resolution 24-31, reappointment of Ms. Luis Mercuro to the Planning and Zoning Board and Board of Adjustment effective November 1st, 2024 until October 31, 2026.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion adopted. Resolution 2432. Doug?
Yes, so this is for Carol Higgins to serve as the NAC member of the Doral Woods neighborhood. Carol's here if you want to ask her any questions, but we interviewed her last week, and it was very obvious that she'd be a great fit for this. She's well known in the community, is very involved, has the ability to contact other neighbors and have them contact her. So we're excited for her and grateful that she made it. And if you do have any questions, she's available.
Okay. I don't. Does anybody have any questions for Carol?
I don't know.
Then I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 2432, appointment of Ms. Carol Higgins to the Neighborhood Advisory Committee, Doral Woods, effective October 8, 2024 until June 30, 2026.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion adopted. Congratulations, Carol. Okay. The next item on the agenda is item 7. It's an ordinance to deal with the FY 2025 budget for a enterprise-wide system. And Dana, you can go into detail here.
Yes, so the village uses the Microsoft Enterprise suite of products for email, Microsoft Office, servers, other softwares and services. That contract expired, and we're in the process of renewing that contract for another 3-year term. This is purchased through a cooperative where other governments are able to kind of piggyback off of another government's contract. So we don't have to do a formal bidding or procurement process to get competitive quotes. We're able to use that contract under our policy. The pricing is very similar, but ultimately it requires a budget amendment because it is a subscription-based IT arrangement under the GASB 96 where we have to account for it as if it is a financed right to use of the software asset. And since we did not know what the terms of the new contract would be back in March and April, May timeframe when we were developing the budget, because the contract didn't expire till this fiscal year, we were not able to build, to appropriate the funds in the correct lines when the original FY25 budget was being developed. So now that we do have the contract terms, we know how we need to account for it. Now we need to put the budget dollars and the appropriations in the correct lines in the budget so that we're able to execute the contract and make the payment to the vendor. So within the ordinance, if you would scroll down to that, please, Shannon.
Let me ask you, is this a one-time payment for a year subscription?
We pay annually, so it'll be one payment this year, one in FY26, one in FY27.
Oh, it's a 3-year.
For this 3-year
Okay.
contract, yes.
Okay.
So these are the increases or adjustment, basically increases to the expenditure appropriations that are needed. It's $162,000 total allocated among the departments. The portion that's being added to debt service, the $55,650, that was essentially originally appropriated in the operating expenditures as an estimate of what the cost of the subscriptions would be if we were to just renew it on an annual basis. So there was already kind of a placeholder in the budget, knowing that we were going to have to pay something for Microsoft. We just didn't know exactly where it needed to be. So this is now allocating those dollars to the appropriate places.
Let me be sure, are we purchasing the subscription and that any of our employees can use it? Is that how it works? Or whoever we authorize, or?
Correct, correct. Yep, so IT controls then which employees and users are able to use the different aspects of the system, or of the software. Correct. And then to offset the increase in the appropriations, we do have another financing use for the subscription liability that's being added to the revenues in the budget to offset those additional appropriations of $162,000.
So are our subscriptions site licenses, any number of users, or is it limited?
Let me check the quote. I believe they do it in, let's see, there are units here. So some of them are, there's a whole bunch of different items included.
Oh, I
Some
know
of
they
it
have
is
lots of different varieties.
individual license-based, some of it, maybe a per-user based, so,
But we don't subscribe to, like 100, and then every time we go to 101, we got to up the cost or anything
no,
like that, right?
that's
Okay.
correct.
And is the debt service, 55,600, is there an offset somewhere else in the budget that does not require an ordinance change? You said we had a placeholder already in.
Yeah, so the 55,000, we had, I believe, 60,000 kind of in the IT budget originally, as a placeholder for what we estimated the annual cost to be. But since it was within operating expenditures, the way we have to account for these subscriptions is it's debt service for that year's payment, and then there's a capital outlay portion for the full 3-year amount. And that is what's offset by the other financing source.
To the extent we already had 60,000 in IT, are we crediting IT and debiting debt service?
Yes, crediting IT, debiting debt service, but then there's also the additional portion that represents years 2 and 3.
Right.
Because that 162,000 is really the 3-year cost at present value.
And compared to the contract that's expiring, this is up 3%, 10%, what?
I'm not sure about the percentage. It was a very minimal increase. I know that it was, given the kind of the bulk discount that you get with these purchasing cooperatives and leveraging their contracts, the pricing is usually very competitive with pretty minimal increases.
It was nominal.
Yep.
Thanks.
So we won't see you again next year on this topic.
Not for this one.
Okay.
If we acquire any other new software, you might be seeing.
Okay, I just, 3 years, okay. Any other questions for Dana? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move to approve ordinance 2419, amending the FY 2025 budget for the Microsoft Enterprise SBITA.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion adopted. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Ina. And now we go on to ordinance 2418. This deals with the Village of Pinehurst Municipal Code regarding the regulation of sound levels and light pollution in residential areas, residential neighborhoods, shall we say. So who will be leading this?
Yeah,
You, Doug?
I'll cover this item.
Fine.
So, as you recall, at our last work session, we discussed this kind of in depth, so I'll go through, discuss some of the changes that we made, and then we can have a discussion on anything you'd like. So, as you recall, one of the things that we wanted to do was eliminate the need for an ambient measurement of noise. So we've done that, and we have put the full decibel level on here. So in section 1 here, put 80 decibels during the day, 65 decibels at night. As a reminder, 65 decibels is about a conversation level. So we feel that that's appropriate. Also, it's a sustained noise, so it has to be 15 instances over 60 seconds. We took this construction maintenance activities that is currently in our existing noise ordinance and it has been working well, so we just moved it over and keep that same language. And then we also added this for automobiles that are making excessive noise, so they cannot be above 80 decibels. We have some emergency exceptions, like generators, and if there's emergency housing dwelling repairs that need to be made. We also have options for special events and for other exceptions that would be made by the village manager. And then for
Is that if someone's having a party at their home, graduation ceremony,
yeah,
something like that?
yeah, if they were having a wedding, we'd
Okay.
contact us. We'll make sure that no one's going crazy.
Gotcha.
So enforcement, this will be done by the police department. People should call the police non-emergency line if they want. And then we have penalties in here that ratchet up over time if there's continued violations. We did also put in here that a property owner, even if they are not the violator, can be cited if there's continued problems at that location.
Question, will they be cited at the same dollar amount and rate as if they were just a tenant?
Yeah, so there will be some discretion by the police officer, so they would probably not cite them the first time, but if they came back a next time, they would probably cite the continuing noise violator with a second violation and the property owner with the first violation.
Does this need to be spelled out more clearly? And not because I don't trust the enforcement entities to exercise reasonable discretion, but this seems to leave a lot of room for a lot of wiggle room.
Yeah, and that was done on purpose. I wanted to give them wiggle room to address this, and to have them be able to monitor whether or not this is a property owner problem or if this is just one bad person that is visiting that location. So we did leave it vague. If council wants us to go back and look at that, we can do that. We could also try it out, see if we have any issues, and then amend it in a few months if we wanted to do that as well.
So can you explain this is residential area only? We have sort of a mixed-use residential, commercial in some parts of the village. How is it that commercial is excluded from this?
Yeah, so the noise is not, for the light, which we'll be discussing later, that is residential only. So the noise is village-wide.
The noise
Regardless
system.
of the source, or, okay.
On the absolute level, and I know we're trying to thread the needle here a little bit.
Yep.
In research that I have done, there's specifications that sustained exposure above 85 decibels can literally be damaging to your health. 80 seems high. I think I was the one who raised the fact that someone with a lawnmower or a weed trimmer or something like that at the boundary of a property might well be in excess of that. But to the extent that we're allowing discretion on the part of the police force, whoever might be called out, should we set at least a marginally lower level there? I'd rather have a lower level and have the
Discretion, yeah.
allow the discretion to say, look, it's 10 o'clock on Saturday morning and the person's mowing their lawn, as opposed to it's 11 o'clock at night and they're playing music outside at high volume outside the swimming pool.
Yep. So I agree. It's on the high side. So the range I was thinking was between 70 and 80, and we put it at 80. One, we didn't want a lot of unnecessary calls to the police department, so that was kind of my reasoning behind that. If we wanted to lower it, certainly open to that discussion.
Yeah. Curious, other communities that have something similar like this, do they set a decibel level?
So most of the communities around us have something vague that says unreasonable or disturbing noise.
I think the whole gist of the conversation, both that was had with Chief Webb and subsequent and last time, was trying to set some concrete standard as the initial benchmark around which there's always going to be discretion.
Yeah. So, yeah, we put it on the high side just because we didn't want a lot of unnecessary, flutter going back and forth between neighbors and the police department. If we wanted to lower it a little bit, I would think anything between 70 and 80 would be
Maybe it'd be better if we lowered it just a little.
I'd be in favor of 70 or 75 myself, yes.
Okay, you realize that 70 sustained levels is still detrimental to your hearing, right? Okay, so sort of using that as a litmus test, that's, I I think you're barking up the wrong tree. The sustained level of 80 decibels is a vacuum cleaner, can be a dishwasher, can be a garbage disposal. At least it's coming off the internet, so it's got to be true, right? Car wash, food blender, that kind of stuff. And I understand we're talking about being the outside. We're also talking about during business hours. I think what we have right now is a reasonable starting point. Let's give it a try, and then see from there. And if it needs to be adjusted, and then let's adjust it from there. I don't necessarily think we need to go down to 70 at this point in time. I think you're making it more restrictive than it needs to be. Let's give our police some discretion.
Other thoughts? None?
I would admit a little bit we're trying to see how many angels can dance on the head of a pin here. I guess, sure, let's see where 80 puts us. Let's see what the frequency of complaints are, and that will also lead us to understand how, if at all, to enforce against property owners as opposed to possible short-term renters or anyone. Doesn't have to be in the context of short-term rental, but anyone like that.
Sure. If it helps, we can make a note that in 6 months we want to reassess, and we can talk to the police department and say, how many calls have we gotten, how has it worked, and then we can report back to you whether or not there should be any changes made.
Okay, so obviously they'll be tracking these, so we'll
Yeah.
have some data in 6 months or whatever that says.
Yeah, we don't get a lot of these calls, so
Right.
it'll only be a few between now and 6 months.
We
But
hope, yeah.
well, at least we'll have something to
Right.
go on.
Okay, other thoughts on, go ahead, Barb?
I have a couple of questions, actually. In the area of penalties, violators may be issued a notice of civil infraction. What happens when we get a call and about too much noise, and there are 10 people there making all the noise? Do they all get cited?
Oh, that's a good question. That I presume yes, but I would have to confirm with Glenn
Just a
to
curiosity
make sure.
question. But I have another question, too. This version of the ordinance says violators may be issued a notice of civil infraction. The previous version said shall be issued. And there is a world of difference between those two. And if you could just take a minute and tell us why you changed it.
Yeah, so we discussed this a little bit at our last meeting, that we wanted to give a responding officer some discretion. So if it's a little kid's birthday party, or if it's a wedding and something like that, we understand it's not going to be a continued problem, and they agree to be reasonable and keep it a little bit quieter. We don't want to have to give them a citation. So by putting that language, may be instead of shall be, we give ourselves that ability to be reasonable neighbors and work with people.
So I would just say that under normal circumstances, I would totally agree with you.
Yeah.
However, I don't think this is a normal circumstance. What we have, and one of the reasons that we are looking at this ordinance, is that because of Ordinance 2215, we have introduced into our residential neighborhoods entities that are in conflict with, in terms of expectations. So I don't think that it is a good idea to, I think it's a luxury to have discretionary enforcement. I think we have to apply the law, and this was brought up in the last meeting, equitably among all of our residents and all of the people who are affected by this ordinance in our residential neighborhoods. So to, allow discretion on one case and not another is not equitable enforcement of the law. So it would seem to me that one of the things that we could do is to focus on making sure everyone understands up front what the changes are in this particular ordinance and what the consequences are of violating this ordinance before it becomes an issue, so that we have an education problem ahead of time, but that would hopefully deter people from the violation, as opposed to focusing on enforcement after the fact. I just think an equitable application of the law in this particular case is warranted.
Doug, if I could maybe extend that line of thinking a little bit. If a police officer pulls someone over for possible speeding and in lieu of writing them a citation gives them a written warning, is there a record of that?
A written warning, yes, but not a verbal one.
Right. So is there provision in this where an officer is exercising discretion where maybe technically they are over the limit, for whatever reason the officer is opting not to cite them specifically, but can a record be made of that so at least we're tracking to see how much of an issue this is?
Yes, my objection to that is if you don't enforce this ordinance at the time of the violation, in the case of a short-term rental, you are allowing a group of people to escape the consequence of the activity. And you have done nothing to address the behaviors issue for the neighborhood, for the people who live there. Because the following week, you have another group of people who will come in. They know nothing about this. They party and carry on. And so, you know, there's no deterrent, and it just keeps happening. So you haven't affected the purpose of the ordinance.
I would push back some on that, Barb. I think that you're actually going to cause more problems by putting a mandate in there. And I do think it's equitable in the sense that all noise issues that a policeman's responding to, that they have the discretion as to be able to give a citation or not. You've given them the authority to do this. And the whole purpose of giving them the discretion, as we talked about, there's going to be instances, let's say the example was a wedding or the example was a birthday party. If you put a mandate that they shall get this, do you know how many of our residents are also going to be getting a ticket because they had too loud of a birthday party or they had too loud of a wedding? So I think you're causing more problems than you're solving with it. The police are very aware of the short-term rentals that are in our community. And they have the discretion of being able to say, okay, that's a wild party, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cite this. Just like if you're speeding and you're going way in excess of the speed limit, you're far more likely to get a ticket than if you're going a few miles over the speed limit. Okay, and so it gives them that discretion to be able to do that. I personally trust our police. I think we've got a great police force. And I think we are a whole lot safer putting in a stipulation here saying they may get cited and trusting their judgment versus mandating it, because we're going to cause a lot of tickets on our citizens by putting in there saying you shall do this.
What if it said shall issue at a minimum a written warning?
Again, how intrusive do you need to be with this? Why can't we trust our police? They're pretty good.
This is not about trusting the police.
Sure it is.
No, it isn't. First of all, we're talking about instances that occur after 10 o'clock at night at 65 decibels. So this is not something that goes on all day. All I'm suggesting is the reason we are looking at this ordinance is because this is a problem currently. We have problems in our neighborhoods right now with short-term rentals turning over groups of people who continually come down here, understandably, to party. And that is not fair to the residents, the rest of the residents in the neighborhood. So I'm suggesting, I trust the police to do their job. I'm not saying we don't have discretionary enforcement, period, in Pinehurst. I am suggesting that we have in this particular case, a very cut and dried, which was the whole point. That's what we were trying to get to with this ordinance. Definition of what loud noise is, what loud disturbing noise is, and a way for our police to be able to effectively enforce it. I trust the police to do.
Well, I think the law of unintended consequences is going to raise its ugly head on this. If you put a mandate in there and you take away discretion, I've found it very difficult in my career to write some sort of policy that's going to cover every single thing. And when you do that, you end up causing a lot of other problems downstream. So I think giving them the discretion on this is wise, and I think putting a mandate in there that says you will get something is unwise. So I do not support going to shall receive that. May, I do support.
Jeff, let me push back a little bit. I don't know whether we had, and Doug, maybe you, I don't know if we have any statistics about the number of noise complaints that have been filed against neighbors for whatever reason, and there are lots of reasons why they could have been. We know we have a problem with certain rental properties. It's not my impression, but I don't have any data to suggest that we don't in general have an issue with owner-occupied, let's call them owner-occupied properties.
Yeah.
So my question, Jeff, to you is one of the things we're trying to do was fix what was difficult to enforce in the previous, and we may not get it perfect, but we're trying to make improvements here. And yes, they do apply. This is not an STR ordinance. This applies to every property in all of Pinehurst, your backyard, mine, and everybody else's. So I'm wondering whether, if we adapt Barb's suggestion, whether we are focusing it more on places where we know there have been problems in the past, at the possible expense of finding that we are writing tickets to people that in the past there have not been complaints. But if there haven't been complaints, then they're not going to be in violation of this. Do you see what I'm trying to say here?
What I heard on there also was that you're focusing on different areas and trying to do what you think is out of compliance right now, okay? Which can also be interpreted as an STR on there. We have been briefed by our attorney before about making sure if we put an ordinance in, it goes across everyone.
No, this
That you
applies to everybody.
Got it. And so when we talk about that, it needs to be written in a way that it is applied to everyone, and there's no gaming of what's going on here. And then I think it also, with that, I think it is wiser to put it in there saying you may be cited, not that you shall be cited. That's the issue we're addressing there. Barb was correct. There was a lot of different things that went onto this, okay? But it was, the main thing on here was we talked about decibel levels. We talked about giving a standard to work from, okay? I understand that, and I support that. I just don't think it should be mandated. I think it could cause other problems.
The only thing I would add is that we have our goal is compliance, so if a police officer goes out there and they agree to stop and go inside immediately, I think situations like that is not necessary to cite them. We do have the ability in our CAD system to note that we went to the location and we either gave them a warning or some sort that we have been to that location, and so next time someone has to respond, there is record of that.
What about the Jack's recommendation about the shall being associated with a written warning? Wasn't that what you described, Jack?
Well, I didn't necessarily make a recommendation, but what if it said, shall at a minimum issue a written warning? In other words, the citation per se is optional, obviously, based on the discretion of the officer, but there is no discretion. You have to at least submit a written warning to the violator.
So this is, council can decide what you want to do. I would not recommend that. I think it is appropriate to make it clear and give the officer the discretion. I don't know if a written warning is going to make that much of a difference, especially if we already have the ability to track it. If we're talking specifically about STRs, I think it's not going to make that much a difference because those who are visiting aren't going to know about this ordinance one way or the other. and we don't have the ability to inform everyone about what this will be. So
Well,
I think it's most appropriate to have an officer respond, understand what the situation is, and if he can determine that, they're going in and there's not going to be any more issues.
well, this does apply to everyone. Barb, you were going to say something?
Well, I disagree. I think that we, by making this enforceable, certainly property owners will understand what the ramifications are, and certainly will realize that if they have some responsibility in this, that they will make an effort to inform the people to whom they are renting. So, and the word gets around pretty quickly if we're enforcing something.
Obviously, we can get to deciding on that particular word in a moment. I want to jump down to the last sentence, if I can, for a minute. If a property owner is not the violator, shouldn't we hold the property owner as a violator if it's taking place in their property? If I lend my car to John Taylor and he goes out there and he drives through one of those traffic monitors and a ticket is issued to my car because I'm the owner of the vehicle, not to John who was driving it, I pay the fine. I get the fine. But in this case, the property owner is sort of held in abeyance as to what's going on at the property that's theirs. So that's something that I'm trying to figure out how to justify that.
Not playing a little bit devil's advocate. Say it's on public property.
That's different.
Are we going to?
No,
put
public
ourselves-
property is different. I'm talking about a piece of property of which there is an owner attached. If it's in public property, it's totally the individual's responsibility, right?
I don't see
I'm
much of a
I'm
difference.
sort of rolling
between-
that out there to find out what people's reaction is, because the weekend arrival, the incentive to be cooperative regarding our noise ordinance is de minimis, shall we say, because they are gone before that citation, the ink is dry on it, shall we say. But the property owner should be held accountable. It's sort of a little like insurance. If someone slips and falls in your house, the person at fault is the property owner.
Did Mike Newman weigh in on this? Did he look at this?
He reviewed the entire ordinance, yeah.
Because we're now circling closer and closer, in my opinion, to needing Mike Newman to kind of weigh in with this. I would ask that we table this right now and see if next meeting we can have a closed session with our legal counsel and discuss some of these things to see if we're going to be putting ourselves in a precarious situation, which could potentially put us up for some sort of litigation on there.
Well,
Okay, I think we need to be careful of this.
I'd like to have more discussion now on this before we
I
figure out the next step, but I have no objection to that step.
I do think that for 99.x% of the population, the presence of a police officer advising you that you got to do something or you're out of bounds or whatever, your activities are probably outside the norm, is in most cases sufficient to quiet things down, at least for that group. I'm sort of betwixt and between on whether or not you really need to have a citation issued in every case. That's why I was trying to find the middle ground on the option.
Yeah, Barb, my only concern with your situation is if I'm out of bounds, and the officer knocks on my door, and I immediately say, gee, I'm sorry, and I tone it down, do you need to cite me? And so I think I'm coming around maybe to Jack's solution as a way to be sure it's recorded. We build data. We know where this is happening. But we do maintain the discretion of the officer in the event that the offenders are immediately compliant.
Don't disagree with that as it relates to a specific situation. What concerns me is that the next group that comes in is going to do the same thing all over again, because we know they do, because it keeps happening in reality. And so the
But
residents are the ones who pay the penalty here.
But I think Doug's point is right. The next people who come in have no idea who's there the weekend before.
Right, but
Or what
I
they
think
did.
at that point, we can do something with the property owner. I mean, like, well, you have a continual problem at this location. You may be held responsible if there is continued noise violations at your property.
If I read
Is
this
that in the
correctly.
ordinance, discussion about advising the property owner of multiple occurrences?
Well, that line that says if a property owner is not the violator, they could be cited, I think that gives us the ability to do that.
Okay, I see what you mean.
How about a long-term rental?
Okay, Don?
How about a long-term rental?
I think you could do the same thing, that,
Yep.
So
you
a
know,
property owner can be held for that, even though they got a long-term rental going on.
Sure.
Okay.
They would, excuse me, then, in their lease, they would probably specify certain obligations. They might hold security deposits for things to keep their renter in check, so to speak. In long-term, I mean, I think long-term renters are probably much more responsible, at least that's my experience, rather than the short-term ones. But can be outliers. So,
Say that's true, because typically a long-term rental is a family or an individual, whereas short-term rental tends to be groups of people coming here to play golf or whatever recreation.
all right, so I guess we sort of have two questions left here. One is this idea of shall versus may in the issuing of a citation, and/or shall versus may, I guess, or just shall, in the issuing of a written warning
At a minimum.
at a minimum. And the issue of the accountability of the property owner, which I think will have an impact on moderating the activities of tenants, because no one can moderate the activity of tenants like the property owner.
Sure. I will say our intent is, as I described earlier, if we have multiple issues at a certain property, we would contact the owner of that property and notify them that if it continues, we would hold them in violation.
Does the ordinance as written give us the right to then issue them the appropriate citation?
Do we have the mechanisms to track what goes on at a given property over time?
Yeah, so it would be recorded in our CAD system.
You also have,
And
we receive a email every morning about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning with the police department report. And so if a policeman's going out there, it's in that report.
I will also add that, you know, these are rare. There's like a half a dozen a year. So, I mean, it's not a huge problem. And obviously it is if you live next to it and we want to address it, but it is not overwhelming.
I don't want to shortcut this comment, but we also have lighting as part of this before we move entirely on.
Right, we'll get to lighting, but I think in the, in this area of noise, these are the two issues that we're spending time on, and I'd rather us exhausted a discussion before we jump to lighting. Anybody have other thoughts or comments on this? As it now stands, as it reads, the issue is the word of may rather than shall. And I'm not certain I understand if there's more we can do language-wise here regarding the responsibility of the property owner.
The village attorney is comfortable with this language as it is, not to suggest they wouldn't want to reconsider in light of this conversation.
Right, yeah, it's been reviewed and approved.
Thoughts?
I personally like the way that the property owner, that line gives us a lot of flexibility to manage something and to reach out to problem properties. Again, I'll just reiterate that I don't think it's necessary for us to give a citation at every time that we respond. So I like the way it is, but
Now, if we were to give a written warning or not issuing a citation, let's separate those two. If we don't issue a citation, we don't alert the property owner.
probably, well, I mean, but either way, we can work with our police department, and if there's a continued issue at a property, we can reach out.
I think I would, I don't know if it's appropriate what I'm going to say, but I think that if the police get called to a property and the owner is not there, you're dealing with, obviously the owner's there, there's, for lack of a better phrase, a grown-up in charge. But I think it would behoove us to just alert, even as a courtesy, that, you know, we were called to your property the other night. You should be aware of this. We were called at this time and with this allegation. There was not enough cause to issue a citation, but we want you to be aware that this occurred. I think a note like that, I know if I was a property owner and I was living elsewhere, I'd pay attention to it.
I agree, but I'm not sure that has to be part of the ordinance.
Right, no, I'm not, it may not have to be, but
Right.
doesn't mean it can prevent us from doing that on a regular basis.
Yeah, our goal is to manage it so that, you know, we do not have a lot of return issues. So something like that is kind of what we were thinking. Again, this is like, you know, we have maybe 6 a year, and maybe 2 or 3 of them are not people living in those homes. So this is not a big issue, and we can manage it like that.
Good thoughts? Okay, so as it now stands, the word may is there. And although we don't say so here about the property owner, we can, on our own initiative, without having it written in here, that there be some form of notification to a property owner that the Pinehurst Police Department were called to this property on such and such date and such time. We want you to be aware of that.
Yep. The goal is to minimize problem properties and
Yes.
yeah.
No, I think that builds a record, and I think it gets the attention of a property owner. And since we're dealing with not a large amount of instances like this, it shouldn't be a very burdensome thing to do. Some sort of couple paragraphs in a standardized letter. Okay. John, did you have something else you were going to add?
Shen, I see, since it's in front of us, that regulating light pollution is specific to residential neighborhoods. Is the noise ordinance also specific to residential neighborhoods?
No, it's not.
Do we envision having a separate ordinance for commercial? Or do we not see the need for that based on history?
For noise, the noise ordinance would apply across the village, commercial or residential.
So our Live After 5, we would never get a
Then we get a special event permit.
special exception. I just, okay.
Okay, just for the record, I object to maybe. I think it should be shall be, just for the record.
I don't think we're intending to adopt this tonight. I think we had a suggestion to,
I mean, we
No, the
can
intent
certainly
was.
table it, but my intent was to pass.
no one has made the motion yet.
No, because we also have to go through the light aspect of things.
Yeah, these are,
Okay, once we're going through the light thing, we can do the motion unless there's well, we'll go through the motion there. Unless something dramatic is found that you don't want.
all right, well, let's go on to light for now, and then we'll figure out a way to wrap it up.
Yep. With light, last time we met, we discussed the real problem is light trespass. We don't necessarily care if there's a bright light on someone's property, but it's not trespassing onto someone else's. We don't necessarily need to regulate that. So the way we amended this was that we would deal only with foot candles that trespass onto someone else's property, and then we put that at 2-foot candles above ambient lighting, and that the responding officer would be able to shield the metering device to make sure that they were not that they were getting an accurate reading of ambient. There's the exception for security lighting, and it has to be motion censored and turn off within 5 minutes. And also there is an exception that the village manager can make as necessary. And then we have the same penalties listed. In an email earlier, Barb mentioned about including notice that you can call the police non-emergency response line. We can add that in. I don't see any issue with that if we want to do
Where would
that.
you add that?
Under C1, the village may conduct inspections, and we would add similar language to what we did up here with the noise that, let's see, residents may file noise complaints with the police non-emergency
Oh, I see,
dispatch.
okay.
So
Same language.
same language.
All right, well, let's add that.
So overall, the light is very simple. If you have more than 2 foot candles, then it's a violation. That's trespassing over property line.
From any light. So how is that measured?
So there's light meters that they just put on the ground, and it can tell how many foot candles are shining on it.
So the definitions include residential lighting, any lighting installed for single-family residential purposes, including security lights, landscaping, decorative lights, outdoor fixtures. So does the foot candle measurement also apply to all of those things too?
Yeah, so if there was more than 2 foot candles of any light spilling over from a neighboring property, so say they like to light up everything and they have landscape lighting for their bushes and their flags, and they also have lights near their driveway. If all of that combined creates more than 2 foot candles on the neighboring property, that would be a violation.
Okay. So the exceptions then, the security lighting has to be motion activated
Motion and turn off within 5 minutes.
and turned off within 5, okay.
I mean,
I'll finish.
we have relatively few places where there are commercial establishments adjacent to residential. This would not seem to apply to those establishments. And I'm thinking of a couple of cases that came before historic preservation of walkway lighting or parking lot lighting, which was attempted to be directed down, but which was not confined to the property. This would not address that.
Right, and we kept this specific to residential, and also, you know, if you have multifamily locations, that also gets difficult because you do want some light, especially in public areas and common areas. So we kept it specific to single-family residential areas.
Do we see any significant number of complaints about commercial lighting interfering with?
No, I don't know if we've had any in the last year.
I'm happy not to borrow trouble.
Okay. The notice of violation here seems a little different from the one for noise. Can we go back to the notice of violation for the noise one? There is no notice of violation. Let's see. No, there's no, excuse me.
Yeah, it's not.
There's not a
specified
notice
there.
of violation.
So in practicality, the way it would work is an officer would go out, respond. If there is an issue, he could directly just go knock on the door, ask them to turn the light off. If they're not home or something like that, they would notify our code enforcement team, and they would respond and provide written notice that they need to adjust their lighting.
That's in the lighting part.
Wait a minute, that gets passed to the planning department?
So code enforcement would be the follow-up mechanism if the police cannot solve the solution while they're on site.
Let me just again, the compliance and enforcement, C2, the notice of violation, this is very specific about property owners found in violation of this ordinance. Probably in the likelihood that lights left on deal with people who are property owners. Is there a reason we don't have a section like that in the noise part?
This gives people the opportunity to correct their lighting. So if you had too much landscape lighting or your bulbs are too bright, this gives them the opportunity to come into compliance and fix that.
Oh, okay. So you change out the bulb or something.
We don't specify a specific period of time for compliance.
No, but typically we have, is it 10 days or 14 days?
So within the time frame given, so I guess that's,
Given by whom?
I guess, given
the
by the
Code
officer or the
enforcement, yeah.
village? And the penalties and fines, are they identical to the ones from noise?
Yes, that's the same.
And the chief feels comfortable that this is more enforceable than what we have currently?
Yeah, yes.
Anyone have any other thoughts on the lighting item at all?
Hopefully 99% of these would be solved by the neighbor walking over and saying, hey, could you redirect that floodlight or something to
Yes.
that effect?
Hopefully. Is section 5 the final item on this screen? Yeah, okay. All right, so is there a will of the council on how to address these?
Well, I move to approve ordinance 2418, amending chapter 92, sections 92.16 sound levels and 92.18 light pollution of the Pinehurst Municipal Code.
Have a motion? Okay. We have no second,
I'm wondering,
so maybe, well, in an effort to continue to move on, we have the option of addressing any remaining concerns with some language. We also have the option, I think, of separating these light and noise, so we can adopt one as opposed to the other, if that's amendable or doable. Anybody have any thoughts?
is there a reason, Doug, that we could not approve just 9218? Light pollution.
Shannon, do you want to weigh in on that? The resolution, yeah. So, right, so we could,
The resolution, yes.
Oh,
but
well,
you
we
could
can
amend
rewrite
the
the res-
ordinance to strike section 1.
I guess my question for the council is, if we don't have a second for this, if we don't want to approve this now, what is it that we want to discuss further,
Right.
Yeah.
other than that, other than the one specific piece of language?
I agree. I mean, I'm sort of buying time to think that there is somebody who has the right wording that might take care of the issue. I would like us to move forward on the lighting issue. There seems to be no dissent on that at all, or no hesitation at all. So if we can just separate that, Shannon, then we can, and make whatever adjustment we need to. I can sign that tomorrow if we get an agreement from the council and tonight, and then we can,
Is the only whereas that needs to be amended the last one specifying that we're amending both?
Yeah. So the motion could include something like to approve ordinance, whatever number it is, less section 1.
Or only those sections that modify section 92.18 light pollution?
Yep, that would be appropriate as well.
Yes.
Just,
I think it's ministerial and it can be corrected and we can act on it.
sure, I guess the only question is, you know, what do you want me to do with it? when
Right,
you don't
that's a
approve
good
it?
question.
Well, you're talking about the noise part.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we can, if we're not going to take action tonight, which a moment ago appeared we weren't, we can put it back on the agenda at the next meeting and see if there's something that can be worked out between now and then.
Yeah, I agree. Either one, noise and the lighting, I don't think it's
I'd like to take
be
care
an
of,
issue in the next few weeks or anything to that
No.
effect.
I'd like to take care of the lighting one now. Okay, so we need a motion separating lighting from noise, and then
Let me just ask a question. This is not a motion. If I made the motion that said something to the effect of, I move to approve ordinance 24-18, amending chapter 92, section 92.18, light pollution of the Pinehurst Municipal Code, only those sections that will be the only section this will revise. Is that a semi-acceptable type of resolution? Oh, the amendment being to delete the sections that apply to the other.
Right, which is just section 1.
Yeah, the other part of this is, I think you mentioned, Jack, that 99.9% of the time, the neighbor's probably going to solve this, so I don't really think there's much urgency
I
in
agree
us
with that.
passing a light pollution ordinance right now. We can just table this, how we're going to do that, and bring them both up, because no one's disagreeing with the light issues at this point in time, and I don't think they're going to develop that over the next 2 weeks.
Probably a smarter move, yeah.
The oth-
Okay.
For the sake of 2 weeks, I think that's probably fine.
Yeah, and it makes it simpler, and we're not going to make a mistake on there. I'll throw back out the idea I put in before. As we're looking to amend these different things, we're getting in a touchy zone here, because a lot of this is associated with short-term rentals, and we have to be careful with that to make sure we're not putting our village in a position of liability. I would, again, encourage that we have a discussion with council on this,
I think we already agreed to that.
okay?
Okay, so that's not.
And when I say
that's not-
council, I mean our legal counsel, not us, but
Yeah, yeah.
with that, okay?
yeah, we've agreed to that, yeah.
All right.
And there is no mention
Yeah,
of
I
short-term
dis-
rentals per
I
se.
disagree with your premise, but I agree with your suggestion.
Yeah.
We haven't.
Noted, thank you.
That sounds like an agreement. Okay. We will add this to the agenda at our next meeting. And in the meantime, we can hear from our village attorney. And/or we can, in addition to that, we could also ask him to join us at the next meeting. Okay. Okay. Now, on to number 8, we have regular business. And Jack, you mentioned earlier,
We have a
you want to do
report.
that in the work session, your general business discussion?
Do we do the survey results tonight or no?
Mm-hmm.
Wanna do
Survey
those?
results are on board now. But what you mentioned earlier, we can discuss that
Okay.
in the work session.
This would be under
General business.
other business or something to that
Yeah.
effect. I just wanted to mention and elaborate a little further on my comment around meeting with the citizens relative to discussing the traffic circle. There's been some rather creative thoughts about redesigns, and no design that I have seen that even approaches what of the 18 or so traffic circle designs that we've seen from NCDOT. These are significantly different and creative, in my opinion. And before I don't want to spill the beans here, so to speak, but what I'm curious about is, along with the discussion about the use of artificial intelligence, and that needs to be explored a lot further. I think we all, the 4 of us agreed, the 5 of us agreed on that. But at some point in time, if in fact these thoughts become mature enough to be ready to submit to the NCDOT as alternative construction designs, for example, along with alternative thoughts about how to use artificial intelligence, not just light sequencing, which is already discussed actually in some of the NCDOT publications. If it becomes mature enough and thoughtful enough to do that, would the council be willing to entertain that in a work session? And then, if in fact we think it's worthy of bringing forward, submit it to the NCDOT as a alternative suggestions relative to construction. I mean, I know we've submitted suggestions, but most of them are related to changing without changing the construction of our current design. And I think those are useful, but this goes a step further. And are we ready to move in that direction, assuming that we see something that looks promising?
Right. A couple of comments. One, thank you, Jack, for meeting with these residents who were very serious. I mean, we've all seen some of the designs they sent to us, and they, as Jack described, they've gone even beyond that now with very large, like architects' printouts and all that. So I think that's good because we have some talented people in our village and that take this issue seriously. And so it's good we get their feedback, and we should take it seriously based on what you've described. And I think what we've all seen in some of them, they were serious. So I would definitely concur that at our next meeting, we should have a work session, probably discussion.
Assuming that we have enough material.
Well, and maybe I spoke too soon. Maybe it's not the next meeting. Maybe it's the meeting after it.
Right.
But assuming these individuals have ready for prime time presentation,
Yeah,
be
I
interested in
don't-
hearing what they have to say.
Yeah, I don't want to, minimize our previous suggestions.
No.
Like the suggestion of the week from the Village of Pinehurst.
Right.
I'd prefer it, if we could, get some response as to our previous suggestions.
Well, we just sent the letter, and I don't know if you've spoken to Ruben yet, because that was part of our
Yeah,
instruction.
I've
Letting him
traded
know
emails
it's-
with Ruben.
Okay.
He probably hasn't received the hard copy of the letter yet, though.
Okay. Do share it with the gang.
Yeah, I just don't want to turn off the tap, completely and say, we're done giving suggestions. I think who knows, we may end up with a lot of interesting suggestions over time.
And we know that they're working on suggestions, so we'll be ready. We'll be ready to have a grown-up discussion.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to add, that in the next few weeks, they're going to have an alternative likely for us to look at and review. And I think they would be open if we had something that was well-developed to look at.
So we may have dueling alternatives.
Or they may produce some joint solution, or maybe the basis for some further serious discussion going forward. But I'm looking forward to what they come back with, and also to what the reaction is to the letter that we sent them, as well as what we ourselves will end up hearing in 4 weeks, I guess would be the time.
The other question that's open in my mind is to what extent we need or should involve the SMPO in this discussion.
At some point, we'll
You
have to
have the
figure that out.
executive director here right now, so.
Right. That's why I asked the question.
And Jackie, I had actually forgotten to mention in my comments that I also met with one of the people who spoke at our last meeting, who said that he had written to the DOT, had some questions on numbers, and I thought I might be able to help him. It turns out his numbers were completely different than anything that I had been looking at. But he also had some design ideas, less, more having to do with intersection angles and how that leads into reaction
correct.
times
Yep.
and what have you. So
That's a part of it.
and just as an ancillary thought for our coming strategic dialogues, I thought the conversation about AI was interesting in this narrow context, but we should be thinking about places where the village overall, beyond simply traffic, could be using that. So I put that down as a future agenda item.
Yeah, for writing ordinances. That's
Right. So I'm gonna, the takeaway I'm hearing right now is, if it looks like these ideas are mature enough for us to discuss and, and they potentially could qualify for submission, so to speak, if you want to call it that, then we should think about possibly scheduling it.
Well, let's tentatively put it on November 12th. Is
I
that
thought
our
it's-
November meeting?
I can't remember.
All right.
12th or
I see
13th.
Dana's shaking her head, so she must know. Okay.
I will just add, DOT has been very cooperative, and they want to work with us to find a solution that works for everyone. So that I
Yeah.
think we are all in a good place there.
Okay, great. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not rejecting anything, I'm just saying,
No, but the only way it can be better formed is if we sit down and maybe give some guidance to these people for how to make it even better formed than wherever they have gotten to themselves.
correct, okay.
A November 12 work session. And Jack, you can convey it to the
I will.
folks you talk
I
with.
will stay on top of that, thank you.
Okay. All right. Now let's get on to the state of the village. Sounds very ominous. And the community survey results, which are not as ominous. But go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, so just to put this in perspective, we talked about what our strategic planning process was going to look like. So this is the initial step of that. So what we are trying to do here is lay out the framework of how we ended fiscal year '24. And to do that, we have the state of the village, which in the past has included a review of our initiative action plans. So those are like the big to-do items that we had done in the fiscal year. It also includes a review of our balanced scorecard. So the balanced scorecard is the measures with key performance indicators that the council has decided are the most important and show whether or not the village is meeting its goals. And then we also have the survey results from the recently completed resident survey. So I'll go through all that. Feel free to jump in and interrupt me anytime.
Yeah, just one question on the survey results. We still have some additional information for them to provide
Yeah,
us?
so we have the tabular data, which I shared with you, but they have a bigger report that wasn't completed in time, but I didn't want to delay this discussion because it delays our whole
Okay.
strategic planning process.
Is it
but-
something we'll see in a few weeks, or?
No, no, this week.
Oh, okay, great, fine. I thought it was being much.
Okay, so just so everyone is clear, we have 9 balanced scorecard goals. 6 of them are customer focused, and then we have 3 that are internal workforce and financial. That's broken down into 20 strategic objectives, and then we have down here our initiative action plan. So these 2 top sections rarely change year to year. They're kind of our standard operating guidelines, but these initiative action plans change frequently and should change as we complete projects and move on. But these are our fiscal year '24 ones to update the Pinehurst Development Ordinance.
Can I just go back? The chart is easy to work from.
Yeah.
I was just looking at some of these in particular where we have the objective. Is the backup to the objective they're not in the IAPs. The backup to the objective is where? In other words, I'm reading, provide effective and efficient solid waste collection services.
Yep, so we have KPIs for each of those, which will be covered in our balanced scorecard section.
Okay, so the KPIs fill that in. Okay.
Right.
Go ahead.
So these are the initiative action plans. We also had future year initiative action plans, which are now current year initiative action plans because we are moving into the new fiscal year. So the first one, the development ordinance. As you know, we have interviewed. We're moving along in that process. We should have a consultant selected by the end of the month. And then we'll hopefully be able to work out a scope and contract and have that approved by the end of the calendar year, and so they can start in earnest in the beginning of the new calendar year.
One suggestion here. When the cost says 0 next to it,
Yeah, yeah.
I believe that is misleading to those other than the few of us who follow this sort of closely. So I would suggest we plug in whatever
It's
it
a
is.
$200,000 budget that
I
we have
understand.
rolled over.
I understand. It's sort of a $200,000 variance there, but I think it would be worthwhile when there is a cost, we just identify it. So go
Like
ahead.
this one. So relocation of public services has been something we've discussed. Roughly a $6 million project to relocate them from Village Place to another location and then redevelop Village Place. And as you know, we're continuing to search for viable property locations. The MPO has been completed. We actually heard today that our new director has accepted the position on a part-time basis, so.
Scott?
That will be Scott. So I will now only have 4 budgeted, no, I'll only have 3 budgeted full-time jobs, so. But this is, as well as it can be going, I think this is working, and we are currently out to have a consultant develop our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which will be a very helpful document because it is fiscally constrained, so it suggests projects that might actually be able to be funded within the MPO district. The next one, the library archives project. Hopefully you're aware of this as well, but we are anticipating our construction documents sometime this month.
Okay.
After that, we'll be able to hopefully go out to bid and start this relatively soon.
Will those documents be on our next agenda for discussion or review, and then we'll act from that?
I hope so.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good.
Then we do have these few future year IAPs. So what has been part of the strategic operating plan has been retrofitting other athletic fields. So Rassy Wicker is next on the schedule. And the plan for that one is to start in December so it can be up and running by March for the sports
Is
season.
Rassy Wicker 1.4, or is it 1.4 more than Rassy Wicker?
Rassy Wicker is the 1.4. That was a budget estimate, so I don't know what our current contract amount for that
I think
is.
this was an outcome of the strategic plan last time where we flip-flopped doing
Yes.
this first and, yes.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly. Developing a multimodal transportation plan. This was kind of on there, kind of got off. But we have drafted one that we are going to discuss internally with staff and then with the BPAC. It was more of a multimodal implementation plan based off of some of the other working documents that we already have developed.
I'd like to make a suggestion that we factor in the SMPO regarding when and where we
Certainly.
sort of execute this, so we don't get out in front of what else may be going on in the surrounding communities.
Doug, will this supersede or take the place of the existing bicycle and pedestrian master plan?
So it takes those documents and puts them more into an implementation plan. So
Okay.
what were recommended in those, we put them in an actual timeline of when we think they might actually be able to be accomplished.
Okay, thank you.
And the last future year IAP, which we are currently working on, is a potential third fire facility. So we are reviewing the Birdie information that was prepared in 2020. We're updating that, and from that updated information, we hope to have new recommendations or new thoughts, and we're going to explore all alternatives on what might be the best solution for us. Any questions on any of those IAPs? All right. So next would be the balanced scorecard. So hopefully this kind of looks familiar. So we have on the left column, the strategic objective, and then we have our KPIs that show whether or not we have accomplished that goal. So for fire and rescue services, residents satisfied with fire services, 100%. So way to go, we keep doing a good job there. How quickly fire personnel respond to emergency is also at 99%, same as last year. The 5-year rolling average of property value saved, again 99%. Moving on to police, residents who overall feeling of safety is good or excellent, 98, an increase of 2% from last year, although that is within the margin of error. Percent of residents satisfied with police services, 98, and crime rate per 1,000 residents has gone down from 37 to 24.
Doug, just to be, these percentages that you're citing are the results of the survey
Yep.
for each category?
Yep. And so we'll review the survey results in just a minute. I don't go into as much detail on these ones because we'll already have discussed them here. So ensuring codes and ordinances protect our neighborhoods. So I don't know if you want me to read all of these. I don't think it's necessary.
No.
But if you have any questions on these, and a couple of them I will point out that the Satisfied with village efforts to maintain the quality of neighborhoods went up significantly here, as well as quality of new commercial neighborhoods. In goal 3, we're still awaiting the business survey results. They were not completed. They take
Well,
longer.
one second.
Yep.
The residents satisfied with the enforcement of village codes and ordinances. Now, for the last 3 years, the summary where they do the satisfaction importance distribution on that, not a pie chart, but the rectangle,
Yep.
always place that in the category that needed a lot of improvement, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking through, because I know I circled it somewhere when I raced through this.
Pat, if I could, I think there are 2 measures. One is the percent satisfied, and the second is the percent who think that the amount of effort is correct.
Yeah, that is.
There's a big gap between those two, which I'm not sure is consistent in the long term. I don't know which one is right and which one isn't, but.
Yeah, there are 2 separate questions. You are correct, and the mayor is correct that when ETC give us our results, they take an analysis of what residents say is important and what they say, what their satisfaction are with those levels. And so this is one of the areas that falls in the need improvement area because it's at 85% and not 95% like most of our other measures. So it is one that they recommend as an area to focus on.
Well, just bear with me for a minute. I want to see if I thought I marked something in my quick review of this earlier today.
But while Pat is looking, just going back to, and I don't want to imply any criticism here, but percentage of residents satisfied with how quickly fire personnel respond to emergencies, 99%. My recollection of the 5 categories, extremely satisfied, satisfied, neutral, was that the top 2 didn't add to 99. They added to a high number.
Yeah, so
How do we get to 99 in these?
yeah. This is something that has been kind of an issue for a long time. Whether you count neutrals as satisfied or dissatisfied, or
Okay.
just count them as neutral. So this number includes neutrals in the satisfaction, and that's to keep it consistent with the way it's been measured for a long, long time.
How to deal with that. And it doesn't
I
make
can sort of understand that. I mean, the person that responds, yeah, no, it's okay. You know,
If we want to say not dissatisfied, but that's a little bit more of a mouthful, so.
So by implication, only 1% said that they were either not satisfied or did not respond at all.
Okay, I finally found it. It was on
Yeah.
the first page. It's question 1, overall satisfaction with village services, page 1. It's broken out, very satisfied, satisfied, neutral, dissatisfied, very dissatisfied, and no opinion. The question 1-8 had to do with enforcement of village codes and ordinances. The highest rate of combining dissatisfied and very dissatisfied, which was 13.3%, that was the highest rate of all 13 of the categories.
Right.
Which is a bit of a red flag. The highest rate of those satisfied or very satisfied were police services. That was at 89, almost 90%. And the enforcement, the amount of people who are very satisfied was the lowest of those 13, and the amount of people who were just satisfied was not the lowest, but among the lowest. So that's why that sticks out to me, enforcement codes. If you go to question 1, where they drop out no opinion, rather than neutral, once again, the dissatisfied and this very dissatisfied combined represent 15%, which is the highest of any of the 13 categories. And in this case, the highest combination of very satisfied and satisfied is our fire services at 97%. So enforcement of village codes and ordinances, at least according to this data, falls into the category where our residents are least satisfied. So that's why I'm trying to juxtapose the 83 and 85%.
Yeah, so the 85 would be question 11, or sorry, question 1. Codes and ordinances is 8. So
That's with all the neutral.
yes, so
Yeah.
it includes the very satisfied, satisfied, and neutral
Yes.
to get to the 85.
Right. So.
But to your point, based on question number 1, our focus area should be enforcement of village codes and ordinances, village efforts to maintain quality of your neighborhood, and then the next one is street and right-of-way maintenance, which I feel like we actually do a very good job of. But
Right.
all right, so that's the balanced scorecard for goals 1 through 3. If I can continue.
Go ahead.
All right, so this is goals 4, 5, and 6 with transportation, mobility, and the environment, and active living and cultural opportunities. Very high marks here. One thing that makes me question some of these things is that the percent of residents satisfied with the adequacy of street lighting went from 65 to 74, and I will tell you how many streetlights we added. Many. So. But any other questions on this section?
Go ahead.
Last goal is 7, 8, and 9. So 7 is maintaining a high-performing organization, so village management. Those are all pretty well. The number of people satisfied with the level of public involvement in local decisions went up quite a bit. And that has typically been an area that they tell us that we need to focus on. So that it went from 83 to 91 is good news.
Yeah, but 26% of that was neutral. I'm just pointing it out. It is,
Yep.
you
But
know.
they're not dissatisfied.
Nope, they're not dissatisfied, but they're not saying yes at the altar. Okay?
And we can discuss this further at our strategic planning retreats. If
Yes.
we want to not count neutrals, that's fine. We just have to clean up back data to make sure we're comparing apples to
Yeah,
apples.
I hear you. I just think it leaves a misimpression a little bit, but go ahead.
Any other questions on here for these 3 goals?
Hold on a second. Boy, there's something I remember about volunteers and
Do we
data,
have
but
any
I can't
choice
recall it.
in the format that we receive this portion of the survey? Or is this is how ETJ does it? And
So this is our balanced
You see.
scorecard, this section.
Right.
So this is what we have determined as our KPIs that we feel are most important to measuring our goals. As far as the survey results, we could probably ask for it any way we wanted. All right. If nothing else on the balanced scorecard, I will say across the board, they seem to have gone up. I wish I'd been here for more than a month and could take credit for some of that, but I was the assistant, so we'll still take some credit.
Right.
All right. For the residential survey results, we had 711 respondents, which is a margin of error of about 3.6% at 95% confidence, or just under 5 if we have a 99% confidence level. So it's a 7-page survey sent to a random sample of the village, and this is the 13th year that we have done this.
You have the raw numbers on numbers sent out and number of responses?
Not with me, but I can
Okay.
get them.
711
For
responses.
responses is 711, yeah. All right, so it's kind of divided into these groups, so we'll kind of go one by one. So overall satisfaction, you'll notice here in the blue, I put the last year's fiscal year 23, just so you have some comparison. But there's a question on most important reasons to say, and the top 3 are safety and security, quality of healthcare, and quality of housing. we don't have a whole lot of influence on the quality of healthcare, but we're glad that that's one of the reasons why people want to be here. And then perceptions of the village. These were what people said as excellent, so 71 as a place to live, 71 as an overall feeling of safety, and 70 as a place to retire. What was below average and poor, areas that we should probably look at, is the availability of affordable housing and quality of residential and commercial development. Any questions? Okay. There's a question at the beginning what we should focus on, and this is the top 4, so maintaining our quality neighborhoods, street and right-of-way maintenance, enforcing codes, and police services.
I don't want to be a stickler. There's a fairly significant arithmetic error in the calculation of those numbers.
So this is based on the sum of all, so you get to put your top 3.
No, I'm aware.
Yeah.
But they've taken the sum of first, second, and third and divided it by 711. So if you took all these percentages, the 34, well, just these 4 add up to more than 100% right there, and they're only 4 out of 12 or 13. If you add them all up, comes to 300%, because they should have divided by 2,133.
Yep, okay.
Well,
Still, this would be the same level of importance and priority, most emphasis.
Well, I'm at page 3, question 2. There were only 3 categories or items that the top choice of somebody, of our respondents, hit double digits. That was police services, that was street and right-of-way maintenance, and then enforcement of village code and ordinances. That's where they wanted our emphasis. Now, I guess the irony is they love the services they're receiving from the police, but that
We should
tells
still
you-
emphasize it.
They want to emphasize it because that's what's most important to them, public safety-wise.
Yep.
But,
That's one of the top 3 reasons why people stay for
yeah,
safety.
but enforcement of village codes and ordinances was the 3rd highest percentage on that list. And when you get into from the list of items, which 3 of the major categories, your second choice, that was the top choice. The second choice, by the way, was fire services, street right-of-way maintenance, and village maintaining quality neighborhoods. So that had double digits. Okay, go ahead, keep going.
So we already covered a lot of the public safety actual measures, but overall, everyone's very satisfied with this feeling of safety. The highest areas of dissatisfaction are with enforcement of traffic laws and frequency of patrols, and that's consistent year to year. And then efforts to prevent crime should receive the most emphasis based on that question they received. I will add, just kind of as a footnote, that fire response time was not an area of emphasis, and also they were 99% pleased with the time of responding to fires. Okay, next, Parks and Recreation. So the most popular events that Parks and Rec do are used by approximately half of the village residents. So if you think about that, half the people use our village greenways and half the people attend like Live After 5 type of events. Yeah, and half the people use Rassy-Wicker. Our lowest satisfaction was with West Pinehurst Park, which is understandable since there's not a lot of amenities out there. And their areas to emphasize were condition of the greenway walking trails, quality of village parks, and the availability of greenway walking trails.
I had mentioned once in the past that I think we ought to give consideration to expanding the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And given the continued emphasis over the period of these last 3 or 4 years of this greenway walking trails issue in our residents' mind, I feel even more strongly about it. There should be people out there, they're telling us it's most important to them, emphasize it. But we ought to make sure we, sort of with open arms, encourage people and accept people who might want to participate in that
Yeah,
advisory committee. Because I know it's small. I've attended some of the meetings, so we got to do some work.
yeah, I forget how many are appointed members, but I think there's 3 vacancies right now, which
Yeah.
we're working on appointing.
Okay.
So we have a few questions focused on downtown. So over half of our people do not shop regularly downtown, and over 40% do not regularly dine downtown. Those are very consistent with past years. And mostly they feel like it's targeted to tourists, so it's not a reason why they need to go downtown to shop. Parking, which we will also discuss, was one of the top 4, but not the highest reason why someone might.
No, it wasn't. I'm trying to find that.
Questions?
Give me a moment. Okay, I found it. Question 14. Reasons that prevent you from shopping or dining regularly. The parking was the 4th reason, behind store hours, behind variety of merchandise and menu options, and behind prices. Excuse me, it's the 5th. And behind the answer that a quarter of our residents gave us, nothing prevents me from shopping, dining more often in the village center. So 1 in 4 residents said nothing prevents them. I just found that as an interesting response.
Yep.
I wouldn't have guessed that. Okay, go ahead.
So code enforcement, we have a few questions on that. So code enforcement is hard to measure. Like if you compare our 65% compared to other communities, that is much, much higher, which we'll get that in the report later this week. But there are areas that suggest that we should put focus on is litter, debris cleanup, cutting weeds and grass. And then,
But one thing on that question, litter and debris enforcing cleanup of, and enforcing mowing and cutting of weeds, grass, both of those say on private property. That's the question. It's not about our village open areas. It specifically says private property. And I'm surprised a little bit of the people who are dissatisfied, because that was 2 of the highest percentage of people dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. But it is private property.
yeah, so
What's
maybe
the
a lot of
response?
these people live by me and have
Could
noticed
be.
my lawn. But
Could be neighborhood specific. But anyway, I just point that out. It's not on our public property, because we constantly see our employees out there, at least I do, picking up trash, cutting trees and bushes and all. And until I caught the words private property, I was concerned. But go ahead.
yeah, so this is code enforcement. So yeah, dealing with enforcing our codes on private property. So this about right at 65% is quite a big jump from last year. And the too little amount, in the past year, we brought on a new part-time code enforcement staff. So maybe that is why that about right number has changed or shifted. We like to think that maybe something we did affected these numbers, but not necessarily sure.
But again, the gap between this number and the number that says they're satisfied is 20 percentage points. Well, that seems to me inordinately wide. Over time, it has to converge. If it doesn't, then there's something wrong with, well, I shouldn't say that. The answers are the answers, and I'm sure they've tabulated the answers correctly, but there's an inconsistency between thinking we're satisfied with it, but we should do more of it.
I agree, yeah. They seem rather inconsistent. Moving on to streets and maintenance and streets and transportation. So maintenance of streets, overall high satisfaction. Street lighting, number dissatisfied went down from 32 to 24. Again, I don't know why that happened, but we'll take credit for it. The availability of walkways, the number dissatisfied dropped from 34 to 27. We did add some walkways, but it didn't drop as much, but who knows. Travel in Highway 5, the number dissatisfied dropped a little there as well. Travel on the large traffic circle, the number dissatisfied dropped a lot. I would say that probably has a lot to do with all the discussions we've been having around it.
Right, stop complaining, or be careful
you're-
what you complain
There
about,
is,
right?
there,
Exactly.
this has come up before, but there is a big differential between how our residents feel about Highway 5 and the traffic circle. There's a dissatisfied, very satisfied combined, there's a 22% differential. They're more dissatisfied with Highway 5 than they are at the traffic circle by 22%. And when you ask the question without taking out no opinion, the difference is there 52.7% in Highway 5 and only 31%, which is 21% in highway, in the traffic circle. So we know that now because that's been consistent with previous surveys. It's just not a one-time phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, the traffic circle dissatisfaction number went down quite a bit, but I agree that Highway 5 has consistently been showing that it's more dissatisfied than the traffic circle. And good news there is we are working with DOT to address Highway 5. It won't be done for several years. It won't be, I think.
And the traffic circle.
Yeah,
It does surprise me a little bit in the sense that there's a good bit of the geography is really not affected by Route 5. I mean, other than, the western, if you will, part of the village, who else would need to use Route 5?
Lake Pinehurst.
Regular basis.
But I think that's the same thing you could say for the traffic circle. If you live at Lake Pinehurst, you're probably less likely to go through the traffic circle than if you live at number 6.
I agree.
That's probably true.
Yeah, the traffic circle is more at the
So it balances out. is what
corner,
you're saying.
yeah.
Never mind.
So do we have any idea what the overlap between people who responded both last year and this year is? I know we try to sample randomly and,
right. I don't. I can ask them if they can provide that. I wonder if they can, but we can ask. I'll say this at the end, but I was surprised. Overall, the numbers seem more satisfied this year than last year. Last year seemed less satisfied than, historically, so maybe last year was just kind of a dip and we're kind of just returned to baseline. But anyway.
I know they say that statistically the margin of error, what have you, is about the same every year.
Yep.
But I think, let's assume there was no overlap. Asking 700 different people each year, I feel differently than my next door neighbor. You get black and white answers that are statistically still valid, but.
Yeah. We just had happier people maybe this summer. I don't know, who knows? But the areas of emphasis, luckily we are making progress in all these areas. So Highway 5 is, has a STIP project plan for, I believe, 2030. We all know we're working on a traffic circle. We have money set aside for availability of walkways, and street lighting is something we plan on discussing at our strategic retreat later. Public services, overall, very high satisfaction. Stormwater management would be the most dissatisfied at 12.5%. So their areas of emphasis is stormwater and cleanliness. And most everyone is satisfied with solid waste pickup as well. Any questions on that? Okay, question 21 in the survey I thought was interesting. List services provided by the village and how many actually use them. So only about 20% of our residents use those services. And library is the most used service at almost 40%.
Well, I did notice that this year we expanded the question to please indicate whether you or other members of your household. The past questions never asked for other members of your household. So, but nevertheless, the number who said no to the library went up to 63. So that it's been usually 60-40. So it stayed the same, basically, but it did not.
Yeah, it's pretty similar.
It didn't decrease at all. Whereas the folks, it's very interesting, the folks who don't, the services they like the most, they've never used. According to this, police and fire, they hardly ever use. And they use even less the code and ordinance enforcement or planning and inspections, which makes sense.
Yeah, so the areas that I took away that we should look into and see what we can maybe improve is code enforcement issues and MyVOP service requests. So overall, the satisfaction with village communications rose quite a bit. Sorry, I don't have the number in there. But the ways that people get information was interesting. Most of them got it from the pilot, so thank you, Matt. The village newsletter and the village website.
How did the village newsletter go up? I'm going to ask the obvious question.
It's just we didn't publish it very often.
Published it this year.
Well, we didn't
We
do
published
very
it
many
once.
in fiscal year 23 either, so. But yes.
People think they're reading the village newsletter and they're not. I'm being serious. We got one out this year that I remember about the US Open. Okay,
I believe that was the only one.
yeah, okay.
We have a question on capital projects. So these were the most important community improvements suggested: walkways, street lighting, stormwater, and street resurfacing. We added a question about short-term rentals this year.
Tricky question.
So is the short-term rental ordinance too lenient, just right, too strict, and not sure? So about a third of our people are not sure. Obviously the numbers there. Enforcement, too little, about right, or too much. Any takeaway or discussion on that?
I think the population of people who made decisions that were based upon, firsthand experience is probably smaller than the respondents,
Yes.
whatever that means.
Well, the too lenient, when they take out not sure, is pretty significant, 35%.
Moving on to leadership, only just over 4% are dissatisfied with the value they receive for their taxes, which is better than last year. And dissatisfaction with leadership decreased significantly for elected officials, so pat yourself on the back. But I will note that it is still not as good as the village manager, so just
Right,
saying.
right. Interesting. Go back to, on the boards and commissions part, what's that number?
Yeah, dissatisfaction with boards and commissions.
It dropped.
I'm not sure why that was so high last year.
Was there a question relative to experience or interaction with boards and commissions? Because,
I don't believe so.
okay.
If I recall, this question is like, what's your satisfaction level with village leadership, and list these three things.
Okay.
And we have a question that compares Pinehurst versus places you lived in the past. So we are definitely better than where most people moved from, which is probably why they moved here.
Probably.
And 94.6% would recommend Pinehurst as a place.
But we don't want it published in any national paper, correct? No. Okay, just want to make sure of
Just, if you're here already, you can stay, but. Just a note on demographics. So on the left side here is the demographics of our survey participants. On the right side is the demographics of what the U.S. Census says our community is made up of. I highlighted ones that might be slightly off. So our survey may be slightly more middle-aged, slightly more white and Caucasian, and slightly mid-income than our actual village is. But I don't think those percentages are off that,
I'm sorry,
that
Clerk,
would make a difference.
why did you highlight these?
Those are the ones that are the most significantly different from census to our participants in the survey.
Okay.
I got to tell you, I'm skeptical of the rent-own number. They're identical between our survey and the U.S. Census.
That is a
can't be right.
typo on my part, sorry.
Okay, what should it be?
I would have to check on
Oh, hold on, let me.
US Census.
The other way around. It's 91.5% own and 8.5% rent.
Here, That's correct.
Yeah, right. Yep.
But I'm talking about the
But
US.
US Census,
Yeah,
so
that-
I have to look that up.
Yeah, please do.
All right. So general takeaways from the survey are they're generally positive, as they typically are, and they're better than fiscal year 23. The areas we should look into are walkways, streetlights, code enforcement. And the level of involvement in local decisions has consistently been an area that ETC recommends we look at based on satisfaction and importance. But as we discussed earlier, that's increased significantly this past year. So that is the general state of the village. So what I hope we take from this is that you have a little background on where we are. And at our next meeting, we will have opportunity for you to provide input into our strategic operating planning process. So you can say, you know, based on some of the stuff we talked about with the survey results or stuff I hear in the community, Doug, I think this is something that we should think about as we start developing our SOP. I'll take that information at our next meeting, kind of synthesize it, look at it, find any data relative to it, and then that'll feed into our discussion at the strategic.
Is your presentation part of the agenda deck?
Is it on there? No, I don't think so, because
Can
we're
we
still
send
working
it to
on
us then, please?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
I like this strategy map.
Yeah.
To me, the arrow should go the other way, but that could just be, I mean, I think the goals determine what the objectives are, and the objectives determine what the IAPs are, but that's a minor point.
Yep.
As I look through many of these, the number of years that a particular thing was there was too long, and I think we as a council need to challenge ourselves to make decisions faster. The library might be an obvious example, but there are many of them here. Even the PDO updates seem to have been there for 3, and there can be reasons for that, but I'm just, in general, it looks like we ought to be better at making decisions than we have been.
John, to interrupt you, sorry about that, but I do feel like currently all our IAPs are actually rolling forward, which has not always been the case. So I think currently we're in a good place, and I appreciate the council has made decisions to help us move these forward.
The other thing, and this is probably maybe better for the strategic plan, but as I was going through this, and I'll give you, actually have one for everyone, including Shannon. And this is why I asked the question about what flexibility do we have in the way this information is presented. So we get to question 2, and we start going through 2 complete pages with 4 different tables showing the first response, the second. I think to keep us at the level, if staff likes it, they should keep it. We're not attempting to micromanage staff in any way. I looked at this as a better way to look at this information and get my arms around it, which was also how I discovered that there were a couple of arithmetic mistakes in it. That can happen to anyone. I'm not shooting arrows at anybody here.
It wasn't me, so go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
This is how I got to the fact that it's village efforts for neighborhoods, street and right-of-way maintenance, and enforcement of code. Those were the top 3. And we see it's pretty evenly distributed there. There's really not much to choose from among the top 4. They're pretty tightly bunched. And then I just highlighted in green and red the top 2 and bottom 2 and all the other categories. This, to me, is a more succinct way, so we don't need 55 pages of this. We probably could have done it in 11 or 12 or 14 for us to get our arms around it and be able to decide where should we be focusing going forward. So I just pass that along for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, this is certainly much easier to digest than what ETC sent us.
Right, and you know, as a generic statement, my interest is getting information that we can make decisions with, not supporting anybody else's business model, because it allows them to compare us to lots of other places, like Colorado Springs, which has 10 times the population we have. I'm sure we'll be seeing some of those when we get the more full description and they compare us to other places. At least last year's, I didn't find a lot of them were really comparables in the way that I would think of that term, but in any event. So that's, thus ends the sermon here.
John, a couple of really one question. Uh, The top choice is the first column where you have 2 green and 2 red.
Yep.
Second and the third choice, okay. I'm struck by the none chosen as a very high number. What's your take there? What is that telling us?
Maybe the survey itself has so many questions that people get sick of answering the questions. I don't know.
It's pretty extensive, no question.
I'm sorry?
It's very, very long.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. I mean, this is question 2, so hopefully we didn't have too much fatigue by question 2.
Well, but I mean, 13 years ago, today it seems like any time you have a commercial interaction or even non-commercial with anybody, you get a how did we do? You get a chance to fill out a survey. I think people are at survey saturation. And then we send this out with the best of intentions because we want this information. We want to use it to make decisions. And they look at it and they say, please. And that's why we get 711 back rather than 1,500 or 3,000. I don't know whether we can condense it and still make it meaningful.
I think that's worth a discussion, because I would feel better if we got a lot more responses and a few less questions. But I don't want to, what I want to say, I don't want to dilute the integrity of the data. But I do agree with you about the
And obviously,
fatigue.
this first cut also doesn't give us any trend analysis. It doesn't compare this year to last. You did that in some of the cases, but we didn't have that information.
Well, in the past, we would get a trend analysis at
Yep.
some point.
But I think that's
That'll be
coming
ETC's
next. Yeah.
report, yep.
And that's something we'll see in a few weeks or whenever, right?
Yeah, I agree that it's long. There's probably fatigue by the time you do it. Like, I had to come back to mine because I got tired of filling it out. So maybe that's something we address. We probably want to keep some of our consistent KPI questions in there so we can compare it to the past, but others I think we
Well,
could look
the good, in the presentation you made, the good news was there might have been 20 KPIs, not the 187 there are in the.
Yep.
So that keeps us up, I hope, at the right level.
If you drop out all the neutral answers, there's less for people to conjure over. I mean, right? You're forcing a decision.
And that none chosen at the bottom, for whatever reason, in the summary that they did, their total number of none chosen was only 61, so their total number of votes was 1,946. They obviously missed the second and third choices. Okay, fine. Everybody, I make mistakes too. So.
right. I think the overall takeaway, though, is focus on neighborhoods, streets and right-of-ways, code enforcement, and don't let police fall. So that's all for State of the Village.
There is no higher response from individuals than police services on top choice.
Right.
Any of the category, in second or third. 154 is the big number there.
That was the biggest number overall of all the choices in any category, yes. Which is surprising given the level of satisfaction.
That's what's that's what's confusing. I mean, it's just, you gotta absorb this. You gotta take time with it, because it begs questions. That's the case.
Well, that could be a don't stop what you're doing good type of comment,
And keep on going. We like it and keep doing it.
I will be interested in seeing the trend analysis, because one of the things that stuck out with me, I guess it was last year, is that I believe it was the long-term or short-term, where we had 77 items that either decreased or did decrease year over year. And we only had, I guess it was 13% that either remained the same or increased.
Yeah,
And I'll never forget that number, because I just, it was not a reason to be satisfied.
The other thing that I wanted, in the question about why people don't shop downtown, those answers might be interesting to me if I were a merchant. Not up to us to tell people what they should sell in their stores and so forth. I'm not saying we eliminate that, because we do like to know what it is maybe we can do to help support the business community, but I don't know that, when I looked at those answers, I looked at that and said, well, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do about this.
But if parking had been number one, then maybe we would have,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was surprised to see it be number 4, but I'm happy to know that it was number 4, not number 1.
We're going to go, okay, well, we are, I'll entertain a motion, unless someone has something else they want to discuss.
I move to adjourn the regular meeting.
Second.
Okay.
Aye.